Welcome to Explore Quiz channel. Today we are going to understand neural networks in a simple step-by-step way, from basic artificial neurons to deep learning breakthroughs like backpropagation and CNNs. And yes, there will be quizzes along the way to test your understanding and keep things interactive. A neural network, also called an artificial neural network, is a computing model inspired loosely by how neurons connect in the brain. It is made of many small units called artificial neurons, and these units pass signals to one another through connections. Each connection helps carry information forward through the system. In machine learning, this setup allows the model to learn patterns from data instead of following only fixed handwritten rules. Each artificial neuron receives one or more input signals, combines them, and then produces an output. The strength of every incoming connection is controlled by a weight, and these weights are what the model adjusts while learning. After combining the inputs, the neuron applies an activation function which is usually non-linear. That non-linearity is very important because it helps neural networks learn complex relationships instead of only straight-line patterns. Neural networks are usually arranged in layers. The input layer takes in raw data, hidden layers transform that data step by step, and the output layer gives the final result, like a class label or a predicted number. When a network has multiple hidden layers, we often call it a deep neural network. So that covers the basic structure of how information moves through a neural network. Neural networks became much more powerful in the 21st century because of two major changes: better computing power and more data. GPUs made it practical to train large models faster, while big data sets gave networks enough examples to learn meaningful patterns. This combination helped deep networks learn layered or hierarchical representations from complex data. Now that we understand the basics and why they became practical, we are ready for a quick quiz. Now that we've covered neural network basics, let's test what we've learned so far.
Here's quiz number 1. See if you can get it right.
Question 1. What is the main role of a weight in a neural network connection? The correct answer is, it controls signal strength. Weights determine how strongly one neuron's output influences another. These values are adjusted during learning. Question 2. Why is an activation function important in a neuron? The correct answer is, it adds nonlinear behavior. Without nonlinearity, the network would behave like a simple linear model. Activation functions help it learn more complex patterns. Question 3. When is a neural network typically called deep? The correct answer is, when it has at least two hidden layers. A deep neural network generally refers to a model with multiple hidden layers, allowing more complex transformations. The mathematical roots of neural networks go back much earlier than modern AI. A very simple feed-forward network can behave like linear regression, where inputs are multiplied by weights and summed to produce outputs. Learning in such a setting means reducing the error between predicted values and target values. This links neural networks to classical statistical ideas like least squares, which were used centuries ago. One of the earliest important neural models was the perceptron, introduced by Frank Rosenblatt in 1958. Around this period, researchers explored connectionism, where processing and memory were not treated as fully separate, unlike the traditional von Neumann style of computing. Hebbian learning also influenced early thinking, with the idea that connections strengthen through repeated joint activity. These ideas created a strong early wave of excitement around machine intelligence. Neural networks were seen as promising even in the early AI era, including in the famous Dartmouth proposal. But there were serious practical and theoretical limits. Hardware was weak, training methods were incomplete, and single-layer perceptrons could only solve linearly separable problems. Once these limitations became clearer, interest in neural network research dropped for quite some time. So that completes the story of the early foundations and first setbacks. Now that we've covered early neural history, let's test what we've learned so far.
Here's quiz number 2. See if you can get it right.
Question 1. Which early model became famous as one of the first implemented neural networks? The correct answer is perceptron. The perceptron, described by Frank Rosenblatt, was one of the earliest implemented artificial neural networks. Question 2. What was a major weakness of early single-layer perceptrons? The correct answer is, they could solve only linearly separable problems. Single-layer perceptrons had limited expressive power and could not handle problems like XOR. Question 3. Why did interest in neural networks decline in the late 1960s and 1970s? The correct answer is, hardware and theory was still limited. Weak hardware, incomplete learning methods, and theoretical limits all contributed to reduced interest. Even during slower periods, some major breakthroughs quietly happened. Researchers developed methods for training deeper networks, including layer-wise approaches and stochastic gradient descent for multilayer perceptrons. Around this time, the rectified linear unit, or ReLU, was also introduced and later became one of the most widely used activation functions in deep learning. These developments laid the groundwork for the neural network revival that would come later. The big turning point came with backpropagation. This algorithm computes how much each weight contributed to the final error, then sends that information backward through the network so the weights can be updated efficiently. Mathematically, it is an application of the chain rule from calculus. Once backpropagation became widely used in the 1980s, training multilayer neural networks became far more practical. That is why it is considered one of the most important ideas in deep learning. Convolutional neural networks, or CNNs, became especially important for computer vision. They use ideas like convolution, weight sharing, and pooling to detect useful patterns in images efficiently. Later, recurrent neural networks helped with sequential data like speech and time series, and transformers introduced attention mechanisms for capturing long-range relationships. So that covers the main path from early neural models to modern deep learning architectures. Now that we've covered deep learning advances, let's test what we've learned so far.
Here's quiz number 3. See if you can get it right.
Question 1. What does backpropagation mainly help a neural network do? The correct answer is, update weights using error information. Backpropagation calculates how errors flow backward through the network, helping adjust weights efficiently. Question 2. Why are CNNs especially useful in computer vision? The correct answer is, they use convolution and shared weights. CNNs exploit spatial patterns in images through convolution, weight sharing, and pooling. Question 3. Which architecture introduced attention mechanisms that became central to modern large language models? The correct answer is transformer. Transformers use attention to model long-range dependencies and are foundational to modern language models. Now you have a solid understanding of neural networks, from the basic building blocks to the major breakthroughs that shaped modern AI. Hope you enjoyed the quizzes and checked how well you understood each section. If you liked this interactive format, do share, subscribe, and join us for the next Expla quiz lesson.